Hi folks, welcome to the Blacksmith Shop. I'm Rhea for the Historic Arkansas Museum. Now today we've got a little project that I want to share with you, and I kind of want to talk about the way the blacksmith had to think about things. So I've got a piece in the fire, it'll stay hot. We'll come back up to heat here directly, but I want to show you something on the table here and explain to you what we're going to be doing and what we're talking about doing. All right, this is a layout of a sequence to forge a blade. Now we're forging this blade, but thinking backwards in the process, we go back to this step, then back to this step, and then back to this step. Now this is just obviously rectangular bar. It's 1/4 by 1. But let's take it back even another step. I want to share with you how that if you don't have the proper starting stock, this is actually 1/4 by 1 by 4 inches, and then it goes back through here. But if you don't have your starting stock, what can you do to take another piece that's say bigger and make into that? So that's what I've got in the fire. I've got a big piece that's 1.25 inches. I think it might be a 1/4 inch thick, and it's 6 inches, 7 inches long, thereabouts. But we're thinking in proportion. The blacksmith would think, for me to recognize each of these stages, then I need to first get the proper proportions on my starting stock. So I'm going to take this piece that's out of proportion, and I'm going to change part of it into the proportion that we need to start this small project. And every project that we do, in some way we have to ask this question: is my starting stock proportionate to the process and the project, the final project? Or am I starting wrong to begin with, and that's going to come back and haunt me later in the process because I started with something that's not recognizable to me. I'm not familiar with that shape to be in this part of my process. So we're going to take that piece, change it, and then we'll compare it and see what we can do from there. Now we're just going to do a part of this process. We're not going to have time to do the whole process, but we may actually, in the next couple of 3 weeks, we may actually go through this process and see it develop. And then we got something else we want to show you too. It's quite interesting. So get this hot. I want this piece to be orange to yellow in heat. So between, it can be yellow, and what I'm going to do is isolate at least enough material to make the starting stock for that blade. The actual piece that I'm working with now, that I'm going to reduce to our ultimate starting stock for that blade, is too big, so we're going to narrow it and thin it. So we let's just say that piece is 4 inches long, which it is. So this big stock, we don't need to use 4 inches. We need to use a smaller amount so that the volume stretches out to that size. So it's a matter of volume. So the width times height times length. So we're just going to shoot high, and we'll make sure that we have enough material. And this again is carbon steel. Making sure that my fire has plenty of oxygen to come up to the heat that I need. And I'm checking it. Double checking. I'll start with 3 inches, give or take. So half on, half off hammer blow. close. We'll step down to a narrower width. However, it's thicker than it was, so the direction we would want to go is that way to lengthen it. So let's get that hot again. As we forge it back thinner and longer, it will also to some degree widen again. We'll have to just keep getting it back into shape. Working at that high heat so that it won't, so it'll act proper on the anvil. Okay, here we go. I'm going in a pattern, hammer pattern. I'm working the boundaries. The boundaries were upset into a thicker cross section. It's still a little bit wide, so we're going to draw it out some more. Having to reach into the fire with these tongs, and it heats them up pretty quick. I don't really feel it myself, but for the sake of the tool itself, I don't want it to deform the tool, do damage. Okay, going back to the half on, half off. So we're getting close to 1 inch now in thickness. Flatten. Using both sides. Do that again. And check it. Double check. Make sure that we're not burning it. We don't want it to be too hot. The more you change the geometry down to a smaller, thinner cross section, the less time it takes for it to come to heat. There we go. That's good. So I'm turning it over and working both edges. And then we'll do a little bit of a drawing again. Again, it's a hammer pattern. Down both edges, back down this edge, down the center, and flat. Well, it's still got color. we flatten it. While it's turning dark, we smooth it. So it may be an 1/8 inch short, but let's look. Yeah, it may be a 1/4 inch short and slightly narrow. It's still a little bit thick. So if we lengthen it, it'll widen some. So let's do that. Each hammer blow has its own effect, but accumulatively, all over the whole surface, several hammer blows has an overall effect. So we have to think in that way. It's not a big, say a big hydraulic press that smashes in a big broad area. We have only a certain amount of area that we can work with each hammer blow, and then they have to blend. Actually trying to smooth it. I picked the spot on the anvil that's smoother. And turn it over. You can see that we've taken this stock and made it into this stock, and it's going to be more proportionate to the size of the project that we're going to be working on. So it's getting there. Another heat or so and it would be there. You can kind of see there's slight difference, but we can get there with another heat or two. But you see the point that I'm making, how to prepare for the starting stock out of something that you may not have that's handy. Start with something different, turn it into your starting stock that you recognize, and go from there through the process. We'll get back on that process in the next couple of weeks, and we'll show you the end product too. But let's lay this aside. I'm going to actually get that hot, warm, because it's good for the steel to put a little bit of heat back in it and take those stresses out of it. When you're hammering, it builds up stresses, and we are wanting to relieve those stresses. Now, this is a trap that someone, Tim, brought, and this has a little bit different construction. I thought I'd share some of the points about it. One of the things is that instead of being riveted together, it's forge welded together. And there's a braided end right here where the hand hinge is. But I wanted to point out the difference. The other one had this part turned up and had two holes in it, but this one actually has a cloven end right here, and the jaws cross over each other and are pinned And I think that's an interesting construction. Interesting way to put that together. I see some good things about it. I thought that was neat. And also the spring. Look at the spring. Look at the geometry of the spring. It's hammered really thin right in this area, from here and here. And yet it's narrowed and thickened here, which is basically the opposite of the way I forged the other traps spring. On the one that I made, the travel and flex is from here to here, and whereas this one, it's really right in here. And when you compress that and they actually touch, then it loads up more because it's having to use this heavier part to flex. So the way springs work are so interesting, and until you make something like this and really delve into the details, you really may not understand that, and I didn't really, but I'm starting to see it, and it's very interesting to me. This is a while it looks crude and it looks rough and it hasn't been set probably in 50 years, I don't know. It's been rusted in the weather, but yet it is well made, very well made trap. Interesting construction. I thought I'd share that with you. I believe this was called a turkey trap, is what I was told. And not for them to stick their foot in it, but for them to peck on this and get their neck caught in the trap, and they'd catch turkeys in that. But it operates essentially the same way as the other one, with the pan and the bale, or the dog. But it's, even to this day, this thing, there's no telling how old it is. We have no way of knowing, except by looking at the welds and things like that. We know it's pretty old, 100 years plus. But it's smooth. It operates smoothly. All the parts, it works smoothly. It's a well-made, well-designed trap. Whoever made it knew what made it work, knew how to make the springs, how to design them, where to thin them and where to thicken them. And you'll find that as a different blacksmith made a trap or anything else, he had his own little peculiar ways that he had, preferences, and probably his own philosophy about where the spring needed to actually be loaded, or the working part of the spring needed to be. And I think that tells a lot. We can learn a lot about the guy who made it. He was detail oriented. He was good as a smith. He knew how to weld. He wasn't afraid to tackle these welds and these complicated joinery. He did a fine job on it, and he was very accurate and precise with the fit and the alignment of everything. So it kind of tells you a little bit about the person, don't it? But I wanted to share some of this with you a little bit today, and I think we're getting on into the cooler part of the year. It's still hot today, but we're doing fine in the blacksmith shop today. We're glad you stopped in to see us today too, as well. So come back and see us here in the historic Arkansas Museum Blacksmith Shop. I'm Lynn Ray.